İyi akşamlar. Kalıntıların Şifası konuşmalarının üçüncüsüne hoş geldiniz. İzninizle İngilizce devam edeceğim bu konuşmada. Hello, welcome everybody. This is the third and the last conversation of the Healing Ruins exhibition conversations. My name is Anlam for the ones who don't know me, and I'm the curator of the exhibition. And I'm extremely happy to be surrounded by Cecilia Granara and Lara Ögel'in, who are two artists from the exhibition. And on tonight's conversation, we will be focusing on transformation rituals and both artists' practices and their works within the exhibition. And I just wanted to give you a brief introduction to why we're having this conversation and why it matters to me. Because this exhibition for me was a transformation process in itself. The preparation and the curation of the exhibition was a big self-discovery journey into my own psyche, but also into the psyche of this land, of this society. And it was a time where I accepted to be vulnerable and really naked in front of people, which is pretty similar to hammam rituals. So I'm extremely honored to be together with two artists who have the same, I would say, courage to be vulnerable and fragile in front of audiences tonight. And this last talk is about also accepting synchronicity and serendipitous encounters, and about the more esoteric side of exhibition making. Not everything is about rational decision making, but we have to also accept the more maybe emotional parts of ourselves and our ways of approaching our work. And so this conversation will be about daring to go beyond that threshold of the rational world, the rational realm. And it's also the full moon tonight, and it wasn't intended. And I know that, I know nothing about what it means, but Lara earlier was telling me that full moon is about completion, right?
Indeed.
So it's like coming full circle tonight. And also now that I have allowed myself to go into territories that normal art conversations don't go into and normal curatorial kind of approaches don't go into, I just wanted to briefly ask Cecilia, because we did a small kind of tarot moment before the talk, and Cecilia drew cards for us. Would you like to talk about that ritual?
Sure. Well, I often do card readings right before I start my day at the studio, and for the talk I drew a card just asking what should I focus on for the talk. And it was the Lovers, so I interpreted that to be an invitation to just be honest and be vulnerable with the crowd. And for Anlam, we drew the Two of Swords reversed, so it was an invitation to not be too much into your thoughts or closed off. And for Lara, it was the Six of Wands, which is to celebrate speaking in public. So, yes, that's a nice way to start the talk.
And maybe on this note, you can also talk about kind of our serendipitous encounter and how your work, Abbracciarmi mentre brucio, became part of the exhibition.
Yes, that's a great way to kind of wrap the issues that you were just mentioning about curating or embracing the non-rational sides of curating. So the work that I have in this show is called Abbracciarmi mentre brucio. I'm Italian, and I was on a residency in Milan, and the painting shows a woman hugging herself, and she's inside a flame, and there's kind of smoke. It looks like smoke, it's actually black pigment. It's in the women's section, right? It's a small yellow painting. And I made it in 2022, I often make the joke that my paintings are more intelligent than me, because I make things and I don't really know exactly why I'm making it or what it's about, and then I will understand as time goes on what it was I was kind of working with. And that way of working is intuitive, and it comes from my practice, which is about writing every single day and drawing every single day, and then whatever feels like it's important, then it can maybe go on canvas and I can work with the image that kind of showed up in my automatic writing or in my sketching. So I made that painting, and I didn't know Anlam at all. She had seen my work in Paris at the FIAC, and then she contacted the gallery where I was, Cassina. Thank you, Cassina, for introducing me to Anlam. To buy the work. And then in August 31st, the day of my birthday, someone from the gallery was saying, you need to check your emails because Anlam, the curator, who also owns your painting, really wants to show this work in a hammam, in a show she's doing in a hammam. And I saw my emails, and I saw she had placed the painting in the hammam. And I was blown away because 3 years earlier, another curator friend of mine said, we should do a show about healing, and it should be in a hammam. And these kinds of things have happened to me before, and Jung, for example, has tried to theorize events like this, like things that seem acausal, or you say something and then it really happens, or you paint something and then it happens, or you draw something and then it happens, or vice versa. You read it and then suddenly your consciousness sees it everywhere. And he called it synchronicity. So that is how that painting ended up in the show, and then we can talk later.
Yeah, maybe just to add to Cecilia's story, I also have a very personal connection to this painting, and it's also, as you can imagine, by that time I contacted Cecilia, the show was already almost finished. And this painting was in my office in front of me every day as I was conceiving the exhibition, as I was, going through the motions. And somehow, and Cecilia is an artist I adore, but I never had this, there were so many moments throughout the preparation of the exhibition where I wanted to contact a certain artist I knew, but I just couldn't. Or sometimes I would get this pulse, I would be like, okay, I have to contact this person now. It's a visceral need. And with Cecilia, although I saw that painting every day, it accompanied me. And the minute actually I saw the painting when she was at this residency, I also went through, a self-healing kind of process. And I was trying to do this act of hugging myself through my internal flames to keep myself contained. And when I saw this image, it was me. It was really me. And then when I was conceiving this exhibition, as you might have heard from me before, one of the interpretations of the title of the exhibition is also about healing our internal ruins through the act of confronting them and healing them, etc. So I was like, how did I not even think of including this painting that I see every day in the show? And then, I happened to contact her on her birthday, and here we are. And there are even more personal connections, but it's just these talks are also the opportunity to talk about the things that we don't normally talk about in guided tours or in more official kind of settings. So I also wanted to ask Lara, because I invited her for a site-specific commission, and I have been following her work for a while, and I had seen her Asaraton work at the Mardin Biennial, and I loved her kind of approach, and I knew that within the elements of the hammam, between water and fire and earth and air, Lara had to be part of this show, and I knew that Asaratons would have to be in the show, but then it kind of took a different direction. Would you like to talk a little bit about your process and your relationship with the hammam?
Absolutely, thank you. We'll talk briefly about the Asaratons maybe in the other section. In the fountain, you have black basalt stones, and on top of the stones are little shiny metal pieces.
Like the ones you
like
can
the
see.
ones we're wearing right now. So the piece is titled Asaraton. I think we called it Hamam.
Yeah.
And it was first shown in the Mardin Biennial in 2022, I believe, because yes. And it was created, well, first of all, Asaraton is a type of Roman mosaic where on the floor, instead of, flowers or fish or other type or legs, you have pieces of food that are eaten. So you have all the remains of the dining hall, everything that you consumed that was given to you to the earth, by the earth, as a gift, you consume, and whatever you don't consume anymore, you give it back. So there's a type of taking and then leaving what you no longer need kind of process. And I was really moved by this idea of giving back to the earth. So in the biennial, I thought, we do have some food-related images in there, but there are also other kinds of images. Some are abstract, some are more archetypal, we might call them, that hold and contain their own meanings in the human psyche. So when you look at the snake, you have certain associations, and you come across it there, and you have other certain associations. So when we see all of these strange symbols on the ground, maybe they are resurfacing, or maybe they're going down. We don't really know. Or maybe they keep going down and up and down and up, and whatever the person needs to see, the symbol is recalled. So that was the kind of thing I was thinking about. What if you encounter a kind of liminal space where symbols are appearing and disappearing, and whatever you need to see, you begin to see. And in the context of the hammam, in my personal ritual, I do come to a hammam every year on my birthday and my birth hour, because it's a place of, I know that it's a very social place. It has been an extremely social place, but for me, I'm always going inside myself. So when I go to the hammam, I'm by myself, I'm inside my thoughts, I'm reviewing the year, I'm reviewing everything, I'm shedding skin, I'm being taken care of. It's very supple, it's very sensual. There's lots of things going on inside and outside, textures, smells. I like it, I enjoy it. And so this idea of shedding skin in the hammam and coming out the same but different, really appealed to me. And I really liked when we put it in the fountain, what kind of things are we shedding, or what kind of things that we are resurfacing. But I think the interesting thing that happened is that instead of dust or a riverbed, which are previous grounds for me, we now are looking at the basalt stone, which kind of takes a different kind of meaning. It's the darkness you immediately associate with fire, which I really like.
Yeah. And alchemical processes.
And the alchemical processes, sure. And you don't, it's uncanny to see black, dark things in such a pure environment. And I really like that contrast of what this is and what it could be, what it has a potential to be. So that's the kind of field that I think we were playing out with the Asaraton piece.
But also, if I might add, in the context of the hammam, as you know, hammams were places of social gatherings and celebrations and rituals. So in this context, Lara's Asaratons also seem like the remnants of a ritual or a celebration that took place centuries ago. And as you know, this hammam has been under renovation for 13 years, and there has been a long archaeological excavation as well. So they could be almost like archaeological artifacts that we have discovered throughout this process. But you also have two more works in the show. Would you like to also talk about especially the thresholds, the swan image. How did this come about?
Thank you. Okay. We talked about the acerotons, and then at the time I was working on my solo show, and that's on its own a very deteriorating and rebuilding space at the same time. And then, I mean, obviously I was working in that energy, and that was the kind of things that I was channeling, and it was about transformation. It was also about death, but it was also about connection with the cosmos. So there was a lot of layers in it, and threshold as an idea and as an image was something that my unconscious self kept projecting, because I wanted to go through that. So when your unconscious mind wants to go through something, it will throw an image at you, whatever that is. Sometimes it's a snake, sometimes I keep thinking about snakes. Anyway, sometimes it's a door, sometimes it's a window, whatever, and you have to go through that to complete that psychological embodiment, I think. So I was going through this like threshold, research, as we call it, the rabbit hole of the threshold, and I encountered a swan. And I took photographs of it, and I didn't think too much of it. But I was extremely captured by it. Like, there was something about it. Like, obviously, it's a very graceful, beautiful animal. Like, it's stories are being told, mythologies are told about swans. It's white and it's soft, and the contrast with the dark lake or a crazy landscape, like it's very captivating, and it really wants you to look at it. But there is something else there that I didn't realize until after, and it's the shape of its neck, because it's not a complete swan where it's like looking at you and you see its face and its eyes and the whole picture of a swan. Like when you think of a swan, you see the head and the beak. But this one is an abstracted swan, and the face is looking inside the lake. So there's a kind of looking inside yourself act, and I think that maybe this is a self-portrait of me at the time. And we can talk about the symbolism of the swan, but I don't want to talk too much, but its neck was making a threshold. So it was giving me this image that I was obsessed with. So my unconscious self recognized that image, and that's what I was drawn to. And we're talking about thresholds as going through thresholds in psychology or in transformation or in your own rituals. So it was a calling, like it just, and I sent it to you, and then other things happened. So it just felt like it found its own serene self in the hammam.
I think we will have to come back to the symbol of the swan, because it's really important also within the exhibition. The dualities are an important theme within the exhibition, not only thanks to the founders of this hammam, Barbarossa and Sinan, because I mentioned it probably in other talks as well, but for instance, Barbarossa was perceived as an admirable, admiral who was a hero for the Ottoman Empire, but for Italians and Greeks, he was a barbaric corsair, a pirate. And also the world of hammams, when you look from the outside, the first image you think of is water, purity, and this ethereal world where there is also this dark side of hammams. There is the underground of the hammam. So I think with the swan, you have these dualities. But I wanted to also get back to Cecilia, and what is your relationship with transformation rituals, and what kind of different practices nurture your own artistic practice?
So 2 questions in there, right?
I mean, you can start with the beginning.
Yeah. My relationship to transformation rituals. Well, I would say that over the years I've finally accepted and understood and it's come to my consciousness that for me and the way I paint, painting is a transformation ritual. I used to work as a student. I was sort of conceptualizing and intellectualizing my work and always trying to explain it and have a rational approach to it. And as I left art school and I was less and less surrounded by expectations of what my work should be, I started using these tools, these transformation tools, which were automatic writing, so 3 pages of writing every single day in the morning, basically as soon as I wake up, and I'm faced with, it's almost a transition state between sleeping and waking. So you wake up, maybe I have my tea, and then I write these 3 pages, and I really don't censor myself. So I see all kinds of words repeating themselves, coming to the surface, and then from there I sketch and I draw. Then when I go to the studio, it costs me a lot of energy to get to the studio in Paris. So I have another ritual to help me enter the studio and condition myself to get back into a state where I'm probably comfortable in the space. And it is a purification ritual. I burn Palo Santo and I walk around my studio in circles. And then I meditate. So when I meditate, it's quite brief, and whatever images come up, I make sure that I sketch them or I note them, even just a couple of sentences or a quick sketch. And then I can start, and then I have a tarot card reading, so I draw 3 cards. So that's a lot of rituals, one after the other, but that's everything I do before I can finally start painting. And I think all those tiny rituals are transformation rituals, because, I don't know, I feel like to get into the state where I'm comfortable with the materials and I'm in the flow, I have to change the atmosphere around me. And I guess in a way, images are a recording or transformation of reality. And that's why painting for me feels like a ritual. And I certainly think that it transforms the way I understand retrospectively and in the moment what's happening to me. It's like a diary. It's almost like a diary. Yes. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Great.
And would you say that your way of using practices that are outside of the realm of the art world, how did they impact your style of painting? Like, were you always interested in occult practices, or for instance, when you were at the Beaux-Arts in Paris, did you feel like you were allowed to explore these territories, or did you feel like it was like something you had to keep to yourself? Like, for instance, the fact that you're talking about these things right now on stage, how does it feel like for you?
Well, my aunt gave me my first tarot card reading in Italy when I was 14. And it was so powerful. I mean, I don't think an adult had ever sat me down and said, "What do you want to be when you grow up? Let's look together." And it felt like something really magical was happening, and I certainly think it helps to kind of open up the psyche and look into the future. Then I bought myself a pack of tarot cards shortly after that, but when I was 14, there wasn't that much information. I mean, we didn't have social media. There weren't like esoteric bookshops that really explain things. So I had very few elements to really learn. Then I sort of stopped. I kept looking at the cards, but I stopped. And then around the age of 26, I ended up assisting an Italian artist, who on the first day of my internship was drawing cards on the floor. And he had done a series of watercolors that were about tarot cards. And it was like he authorized me to go back into that world. Because when I was a student at Central St. Martin's in London for 3 years, and I finished in 2013. And then I was a student at Beaux-Arts de Paris for 5 years, and I finished in 2020. And in the second era of studying, I felt that I was a little bit more authorized. But when I was at St. Martin's in 2013, figurative painting was not looked upon as something that was conceptually serious. It didn't have that gravitas. And the kind of Rinascimento, like the renaissance of more esoteric practices such as tarot reading and they really hadn't happened yet. I feel like there's a real renewed interest and acceptance of these practices. Yes, so that's, and the second question was how did...
No, it was exactly that. And
how did it impact...
like for instance, what other occult practices are part of your painting practice? Because we were also talking about family constellations and...
Yes.
Would you like to mention a little bit about that?
Yes, and I also want to answer, you said, how does it feel to say it on stage? Actually, it feels a little scary. But the thing about occult practices is that they don't have to be frightening. No. You can do what you want of them, and I really just think people are frightened of them because it kind of messes with reality and the psyche and time, so then people kind of shy away from them. But really, it's like si tu t'empares, if you study and really connect yourself to the iconography of these images, it's so powerful and it's a real tool for transformation. Yes, and so my partner's in the crowd, and in January I participated in a family constellation for the first time, and I felt that from that moment onwards I started doing them, and actually it coincided with the moment where I also did a advanced tarot class reading. So like the kind of idea of, in family constellations, there's this idea of putting order in your family tree energetically, and in that moment I started painting trees and family trees. So I think all of these, anything can be a ritual if you put that intention in, and anything can transform an artistic practice, and therefore the practice transforms you. I really think it's like a Ouroboros, it's like a snake that eats its own tail, and I hope that answered your question.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, when I was thinking about the exhibition, I also, like, I don't have any of these rituals in my practice or in my daily life, but when I think about the women's section of the exhibition, in retrospect, because none of the decisions were made based on, really rational decisions, but they were really intuitive decisions. And then when I've started to have conversations with artists, we have discovered more and more relationships with the works, with their, starting points, symbolism, and certain things that I didn't know actually existed between the works, from the Omphalos stone in Delphi, and me going to Pompeii for the research of this exhibition, and trying to understand why I was drawn to those transformation rituals, Orphic rituals, all these Ulysses mysteries. And these are things that are quite new to me, and I feel like the women's section's hut area is really a portal. And it became a portal through the, the works that compose that space. And it's somehow also about accepting, something about womanhood also. And that's what we were talking about with both Lara and Cecilia yesterday. I think as a woman, sometimes you feel like you don't have the authority to claim something or to experiment with something. And but the magic starts when you kind of go beyond that threshold of your own limits. And I wanted to also ask Lara about how, do you have any rituals in your practice, or because I know that you're a big, avid Jung reader, and obviously he is one of the theoreticians of, inner transformation rituals. And how does it tie to your own practice?
Yes, I think Jung absolutely is one of my religions in that sense of I am a person who's always trying to understand herself and understand the world through the dynamics and the encounters and what happens and what doesn't happen. So I think he was a person who always had the bravery to go inside himself, and I think that makes him different than other psychoanalysts and practitioners. And he was extremely open to occultism. He was extremely open to all the other phenomena, including aliens and astrology and magic and all of those practices, because he knew what when we cannot deny the existence of these things. Whatever works for you, and you have to embody it in your own way, and whatever your psyche needs. Like, we can look at it through that. Like, I'm not an analyst. I'm not a psychology student. I just have an interest in this, so I don't want to go further on claiming things left and right.
But what matters is the way you interpret it into your own work.
Yeah. I mean, I went through this in 2019 after like a personal thing happened with the home and the studio of mine. I began to kind of take things extremely literally, in a way that there was a fire and then there was water to calm down the fire, and those are like main elements of the life, basically, fire and water. And I was trying to understand why these things were happening and what could they mean, and they were happening inside to my studio and inside my studio, to my living space. And I felt that was very symbolic. So, and then I was also at the time about to turn 33, which is also an important year for a person. And I thought there's a lot of meaning here, and I need to understand what's going on. And then I went to Paris, and then early 2020, and then I came back, and then the pandemic happened. So there was a lot of time to go inside. And I did go through a very intense, it wasn't an analyst, but it was a therapy process. And that's when I kind of looked deeper into Jung, and I looked deeper into symbols, and I looked deeper into the other practices that I was interested in, and found what they could mean. And that's when alchemy kind of resurfaced for me. So that's kind of like, I don't go to my studio and sit down, and I wish I could be there more, but I'm kind of a person who lives and encounters things, and then sits down and tries to make a meaning of it, or tries to recreate it in her own language. So that's how I work, and in that sense, like, I have the birthday rituals or dream recordings. That's very important to me, to kind of see what's going on in the psyche. What's being called for, and writing letters to my friends, or other sorts of things that can be called rituals, but nothing like specific that always happens at a certain hour of the day.
And can you also talk a little bit more about the swan, because we kind of cut it short earlier, but I'm also extremely now drawn to the symbol of the swan, because in the exhibition you might have seen that there are lots of works that are genderless, and there are lots of women artists like Mehtap Baydu, who's also in the audience today. A lot of women dealing with their own bodies, but in a non, I don't know the correct term, but in a non-eroticized way, and in a in Zoe's work, in Candar Furtun's work, in Mehtap's work, these are really universal creatures, and they're beyond certain civilizations, they're beyond gender archetypes, and I find that the hammam is the perfect kind of space to look into how these dualities are maneuvered in our artist practices. And for instance, you might have seen Zoe Paul's Curtain, where you have a talismanic figure, and you can't really tell if it's a woman or a man or a monkey, or if it's from a Greek kind of myth or an Indian myth. And I was really drawn into those symbols that are between genders, and the swan is actually one of them, because the swan looks extremely feminine from the outside, because we all grew up with Swan Lake and then, you know, the black swan. But at the same time, in Greek mythology, of course, the swan is Zeus, who's raping Leda. But then I was actually reading Başla when I was preparing the exhibition, when Lara first told me about the swan. Like 2 pages later, I came across the swan complex as described by Başla. So then I was understanding that the swan embodies much more than we think, and then, you know, it's everywhere in ancient mythology, in old master paintings, in today's contemporary pop culture. And I wanted to also get your feelings about the symbol of the swan.
I encountered it, and that's what happened. Like, I didn't go looking out for the swan. So I just want to make that clear, because I wasn't planning on revealing all these like meanings behind it.
But that never happens like that.
It never happens like that, and it's extremely organic. The more I sat with it, the more we talked about what it could mean, and the more I obviously like went and researched. I also associated the swan in its own duality, as you said, in fairy tales. There's lots of fairy tales where the young maidens are actually swans, and they kind of like take their feathers off and become like young maidens, and then wear their feathers back and they become swans. So there's a lot of that. And then you have the mythology of Zeus or other gods transforming into swans. And then you have alchemy, and there's the symbolism of swan in alchemy. But before that, so we can acknowledge that the swan is, as a symbol, it's one of the symbols is light because of its feather. And so it contains 2 luminaries. You have sun and you have moon. You have the masculine and then you have the feminine. So in its own sense, it's kind of a hermaphrodite, because it contains both of these things. And I think that was extremely appealing to alchemists, because they also were very considerate of having both. And this doesn't mean that having both, gender parts. It's a little bit deeper than that. So it's containing the darkness and the lightness within. It's containing the below and the above within. So it's containing both of the powers inside yourself in that way. And the swan is the second stage in alchemy. The stages in alchemy are represented by birds. And alchemy is, in its very sense, it's chemistry. However, Jung thought that these people weren't really, they were trying to get to gold. The idea of alchemy is to make gold, transform metal into gold. And at the end, you get a philosopher's stone, which makes you live forever. That's a different story. But in psychology, in the way Jung read it, is that these people were looking inside themselves, and alchemy is the transformation of the soul. It's the symbols of transformation of the soul, the process of the transformation of the soul. So you have the first stage, which is absolute darkness, which is represented by a black crow. And it's dark because it's when you go inside yourself first. So it's unfiltered waters. You don't know what you're expecting. It's very dark in there. You're by yourself. And the second stage, it includes fire. And the second stage is represented by the swan, the white swan, because the second stage is when the light begins to enter. And I like to think of this as the kind of a wound, because we have the beautiful quote by Rumi, wound is where the light enters you. So in that darkness, in the darkness inside yourself, you begin to see the wounds of yourself, and you begin to see the lights in yourself.
Only through the wounds.
Only through the wounds, which is also something that I think about a lot.
It's also basically the theme of the exhibition.
It's basically the theme of the exhibition.
Yeah.
Ama these are all things that happened very organically.
Yeah.
You know, we didn't know about this at all.
Till much later.
Till much later. I just saw a beautiful creature and I was captivated by it, and it had a symbol on itself, like it was a symbol carrying another symbol. I was really drawn to it, and now we're talking about something completely different.
And what does this metaphor mean for you? The darkness and lightness that you play.
I was taking notes as Lara spoke, because I was thinking of the painting that's in the show, and it's a woman. Well, as you were saying as well, it's a person with long hair, but the gender isn't really specified, so it's like a being. And the first, in that moment when I was making that series of paintings, I was using yellow. The first layers were yellow pigment, and then I drew with, which is light for me. A lot of my paintings start with yellow backgrounds, and then I put darker colors on top so it looks kind of luminous. Then I painted with purple the figure of the woman or person hugging themselves. And purple for me is a color that, it's a very dramatic color. I think that it's more like violet. You need to use red and dark blue to get the violet that I was using, and I think that red is like blood and life, and it's very alive, and dark blue is like the bottom of the sea, or it evokes like bodies of water or mysterious kind of aquatic panoramas. So like to mix them gets violet, and that's how I drew the person and the flames. And then I let it sit for a couple of days, and then I thought, okay, I'm going to mix pure black pigment. And that was the first time I did that. I had brought black pigment with me, and I usually work horizontally, so the painting is on a table or on the floor. In this case, it was on the table, and I mixed the pigment, and it even made me think of the basalt. Is that what you call it?
Basalt.
And I layered it on around the figure, so it looks like, when it dried, it looked like smoke, which is so magical. That's what paint can do. And I just completely relate to everything you were saying about wounds being the start to place the healing. So the darkness is where the light can enter. And that painting really encapsulates all of that, because it's very literally light with dark, and then there's like an in-between, which is the drawing of the figure. And then there's the symbolism, which is, well, it could be like a fetal position as well. Anlam later told me that she had done breathwork workshops, and that is that right? They had instructed you to hold yourself?
They told me, like, I've done it only once. Unfortunately, I wish I could do more. But the only takeaway that I remembered from that session is that to kind of contain myself, and because I don't know how to meditate, I don't know how to stay put, I don't know any of these things that you were mentioning. I'm like a total newbie. And the only thing I learned how to do was to exactly like the position of your being on your painting was to put your hand like this and to hold yourself when you felt anxious, or when you actually were facing your own ruins or your own anxieties. That was kind of a way of holding yourself. But also, I think within the realm of the hammam, obviously fire is the most important element. Although we think that sometimes water is the more important element in the hammam, I would argue that without the fire, the hammam has no, like, it doesn't have the same symbolism and the same function. And so, underneath the hammam, you have the furnace, and there is wood burning every day. And of course, today we're using natural gas, but back in the days, it was through the wood burning pretty much like in your
In
painting.
the painting, yeah.
And there were these külhambi who were heating up the hammam in the underworld of the space, dealing with fire and flames every day. And they were selected from these orphan boys, and they had terrible, really difficult lives.
It's in the museum.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
That's another synchronicity, because when I drew that, it was completely intuitive and instinctive. I have never done a breathwork workshop where somebody told me that if I'm nervous, I should go like this, although now it makes sense. But so that's incredible.
Yeah.
That it's an actual healing technique to
Yeah.
hold yourself, and that I put surprise.
Hey.
Maybe ghosts of the hammam.
Because of the hammam. Oh, that's so funny.
Yep.
Yep.
You wanted to say something, but
It was about the flames. Just that it's the perfect setting for that painting, and fire imagery. No, that's it. That's it.
I mean, I think we can continue forever with this like
Sure.
free associations and going with the flow. But I would also like to ask the audience if you had any questions. And it has been a really, we're coming to the end of the exhibition. It's a very emotional week, at least for me. And I also really, through this exhibition, my name is Anlam, means meaning in English. I don't know if I told you. And my name was given to me in order for me to seek the meaning of life, but I wasn't supposed to find it. I was supposed to just go on that journey of finding it. And through the last few years, I realized that, and through the making of this exhibition, and through all the artists that I have encountered and all these stories I've listened to, we are all searching for ourselves. I think that is kind of the journey we are on, and art sometimes acts as a mirror or as a facilitator, or sometimes as a slap on our face, sometimes as a hug. It can act in different ways to help us on this journey of finding our true, authentic, selves, like the individuation process, basically. And I think this exhibition has been a little bit about this journey of finding ourselves as individuals, but also as societies, because the excavation process is about psychoanalysis, both collectively but individually. And I'm really grateful to everyone who shared this experience with me in a really open-hearted way. And there were so many people who came to me after seeing the show, who hugged me, who cried with me, who shared these intense emotions with me, and I'm very grateful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions before we go? Thank you.
I think this was a very powerful and successful experience for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You and the artists.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you for this lovely conversation. I'd like to ask you how you define ritual, but I'd like to define for yourself, not a general definition, but how do you live it? Because the reason I'm asking this, rituals, like you said, are transformations, transformative acts. And historically or anthropologically, when you look at rituals from tribes, they can be pretty powerful and violent, you know. Rite of passage can be really actually violent. I mean, they disturb you. They're not really like hugging, loving feelings. The rituals can be really violent and powerful. But from your descriptions, I feel like you do it every day before your studio. It's as if it sounds to me. That's why I like to explain. They're like habits, or like, you know, something you do every day to comfort yourself almost. And I like to hear how you define it for yourself. Is it something really powerful for you, or is it something comforting you?
I can answer that. Yes, I think to me, a ritual today in my 2023 in the world I inhabit is anything that connects me to a sense of magic or wonder, or reminds me that there might be something outside of me, and that wakes up my consciousness in a way. And I think that it's softness and comfort and gentleness. I wish that there were more rituals that helped everybody, I think, enter into spaces like that. So I suppose that all the rituals I do are healing rituals in a way. They put me in that kind of, they condition me to enter a mindset where I'm very relaxed, and that's where I make work best. But certainly, I mean, hundreds of years of history has shown us that not all rituals are aimed at feeling comfort, healing, or softness.
And it was actually a conscious decision not to define what a transformation ritual is at the beginning of the conversation, because, for instance, for me, a ritual can be a personal, you know, process that you define, as it can be a collective ritual. Like the hammam ritual is also a ritual. Coming to the hammam for some can be like Lara going to the hammam by herself to connect with herself. But in the Ottoman Empire, for women, the hammam ritual was an entirely collective social ritual of bonding, freeing yourself from your social, you know, identity, and just being together. So I think the definition, you know, we're not exploring an anthropologic definition of a ritual. And I personally don't have any habits, don't have any personal healing rituals, and I actually suck at those. So for me, it was more about finding ways of connecting with what Cecilia was describing as with what's kind of magic, or connecting with other realms that today's world kind of disconnected us from. And I was in Egypt, for instance, very recently, and you see that rituals were really part of their lives. Not only the more like violent rituals that you were saying, like, you know, you sacrifice animals, you sacrifice sometimes even human beings, but they were also these healing rituals and sacred rituals that connect you with the divine or the ethereal, the celestial aspects that kind of connect you with a higher state of being. So I like to think of the title of the conversation as a gateway, as a portal also to talk about these things that we don't always feel comfortable talking about, because in the art world we like to theorize everything. It has to be political, it has to be conceptual, it has to refer back to certain writers and not the others, and it's about us freeing ourselves from that theoretical framework.
Yeah. I would also say that I would define the difference between a habit and a ritual as a habit is something that you do unconsciously, almost automatically, and a ritual is something that you do with intention. So drinking a glass of water without thinking about it can be a habit. You hydrate yourself. Drinking a glass of water while you really invoke the purification aspect of the water, if you're doing it in that way, if it becomes a ritual for you in that way, I suppose it can transform into a ritual.
Sorry, I didn't mean habit. Routine. The word I was looking was routine.
A routine.
But you said it's, I mean, I was thinking about that as well, and I thought about showing up for something. For me, it's always a mark of time. So for me, every new moon, I write a letter to the full moon so that I know what's happened to me 6 months before. So there's a track of time, and I like that as a person. Coming to a hammam every year, I like when things come back to you, or I physically see something change. That's more of a ritual for me. When I see something, I like it. Then it's like mission accomplished. But other than that, for me, it's showing up. Like showing up for yourself or showing up for your dreams. But there is a thin line between maybe habit or routine, but whatever works for you.
Yeah.
Whatever works.
Yeah, I think the line might be thin, it's true. I suppose you could define routine as something that you put in place as in repetition. But I think I'm comfortable with that. I think I have made my rituals into routines.
But also maybe you think immediately of rituals as collective, acts of performing something. And maybe it sounds a bit wishy-washy or like a bit like well-being-y when you talk about daily rituals. But I think it's about how you approach, and I don't think we have to always fit into one definition.
So the exhibition is called Healing Ruins, which the first two titles were The Ruins That Heal and The Healing of the Ruins. And then surfaced the third meaning after the exhibition, which you told in the first talk, which was that healing actually ruins. So now I have a question for all three of you. Anlam, first to you, and they're the same question, but would you be able to have done this exhibition if you didn't have ruins to heal?
Wow.
1 second. Cecilia, you meditate, that's great, and you sound wholesome. That's great. Although David Lynch also meditates, and he's surely not.
Okay, I couldn't hear that.
David Lynch also meditates, and
Yes.
he's probably darker. And you speak of wounds, and light coming in through wounds and Rumi, etc. So then, the question I have for you is, I have a tendency to believe in the creative or artistic process as related to neurosis. No offense. So where does neurosis stand for you in the artistic process?
I can start about the
That's
question.
interesting.
For me, the name of the show does not evoke, like healing, I think, is not an end goal. There is no such thing as I am healed. It's not a medical condition that you can heal from that we're after. Because even when you, let's say this hammam, let's take this hammam as an example, that was the starting point of the exhibition. It was in ruins when the Marmara Group bought it, and they restored it for 13 years. They did an excavation, and now it's in this impeccable condition, but it will deteriorate. It will need care again. It will need to be restored again. In 100 years, who knows in which state it will be. It will live, it will function. And it's the same thing for me. Like this show opened this new door for me into my own psyche, into my own way of dealing with myself and with the world. And it's not seeking for healing as an end goal. And I don't think any of the artists are kind of aiming at true healing of our ruins. And I think it's about, as we have discussed before, it's like this mythological journey that you embark upon to reach Ithaca or reach the golden fleece, but it's the journey that matters, although it sounds really cheesy when I say it like that. I think for all of us, it was about, like, do you have the guts to embark on that journey, to confront your own ruins, to confront the ruins of the city, of our society? And it's only through working on these ruins that we can evolve. So it's not about healing as in the medical sense of the term, but it's about looking into those ruins and trying to repair them, but they will break again, they will become ruins again, another wind will come, another storm will come, maybe a meteoroid will come, I don't know. So it's a process, basically.
How much time do we have?
I think maybe 5 more minutes, and then...
What's your definition of neurosis?
Oh,
Or how
Troubled waters?
trauma? Sorry?
Troubled waters?
Troubled waters? Okay,
I
well,
mean, at best. I'm assuming it has levels.
then, I mean, both work. Troubled waters or trauma. In that, if that's your definition of neurosis, then I think my relationship to art and troubled waters and trauma is just that in the way that I work with automatic writing, images, emotions, anything that surfaces up, I draw it, I represent it. So
They transform it.
Yeah, if neurosis is part of it, then it's going to be in the work. That's it. I don't know if that answers your question.
I couldn't understand the question, so can I ask for you to repeat it again?
I think what he's basically trying to ask, like, I think creative work comes from a certain
Neurosis.
dark place in you.
Yeah.
And Curly is obsessed with the idea that if you heal that dark place, if it's all light, how can you create?
But
Maybe I'm wrong, huh? Yani.
But do you think we're healed? I mean, it's not.
Surely Cecilia sounds more healed than the two of you, but I don't know. Do we ever
This
get
is not a
healed?
competition, Curly.
That's the question.
It's funny.
Do you manage the healing, or is it just cleaning, or is it?
I think it's about embodying. So it's about wearing your wounds and wearing your darkness and wearing, and it's never something that you just kind of leave and go on into the journey. You have to carry it with you, because that's where your strength comes from, in a way, because you know yourself, because you have this practice of rebuilding, and you have the courage to look inside again. So it's not something, when you have a wound, you have a mark, and you live with that mark, and you always look at that mark, and you're like, oh, okay, that's where I burned my hand in the oven, so I'm not gonna do that again. So if I don't have that, then I would maybe forget it. So, everything is about embodying the dark and the light. But it's a solid question, because at one point, I always, I thought when I was young, so if I, go to the therapy and I heal, like, how am I gonna write? Or, how am I gonna do? I thought about that when I was very little, until I hurt more, and then I understood that we had to be together.
I think there's a big mythology around the image of the artist as a tortured genius as well. That doesn't necessarily. We don't have to accept that. It's there, and I identify with it many times. But we can also make work from a place of light and whatever that may mean to you, but also joy and eros and happiness. I mean, that can be equally powerful, in my opinion. But
Thank you.
But then again, I painted a burning woman smiling, so I don't know.
I think we're ending on a rather positive note, not entirely, but semi-positive notes. I want to thank you all for coming.
Thank you,
the Marmara Group, for making this possible, to our lovely team for making this happen. And the hammam will reopen as a functioning hammam next year in March 2024. So we're all waiting for you for hammam rituals this time. And but the arts and culture program within the hammam will continue in the next year. So follow us and stay tuned for more. Thank you so much.
Thank you.